Space Cadet on it. And our sales went up 300%.
Wow.
Westerns and science fiction. Also in the 50s, it's the beginning of TV. Everybody's watching serials at home, science fiction.
Right.
Well, 2 years later, a company called King Thermos Sealy, where we get the name Thermos from, came up with the first 4-color lithograph on a lunchbox with Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. This is about 1953. Sales went up another 200%. Now the lunchbox wars are on. Not to be outdone, Aladdin comes back 2 years later, changes the shape of the lunchbox, puts a 4-color lithograph on the whole thing, and comes out with a chuck wagon, which I consider like the Cadillac of all lunchboxes. So the Flaming Arrow going into the chuck wagon. She's inside putting out the fire. He's hauling water for the fire. She's loading guns for him to shoot at the Native Americans. They're shooting at the Indians at the back of the chuck wagon. He's underneath shooting at the Indians. Very bottom, they're circling the wagons, getting ready for the attack. So after this, every time you had a hit TV show or a radio show or a movie, you were immortalized in a lunchbox. It was like the Nielsen rating at the time. But not only were TV shows and movies made in lunchboxes, but also pop culture events in American history. For example, this lunchbox over here looks like a loaf of bread. That came out in 1965 by the Campbell Soup Company. At the same time, Andy Warhol was doing the large pop art soup cans. Pop art was the big art movement at the time, and their advertising slogan at Campbell's was "Soup and a sandwich makes a great meal," so hence the loaf of bread. About 2 years later, '67, this comes out by U.S. mail to commemorate the use of zip codes universally across the United States. Remember Mr. Zip, the mail carrier, place the student to write down his zip code so he always remembers it, or in case he loses his lunch, somebody can smell it back to him. Another one is out here that's kind of fun. In the middle of the ceiling there's a white little blue trim called The Exciting World of Metric. You guys remember in the early 70s everybody was supposed to switch to the metric system? The only thing we got out of that was 2 liters of pop in that lunchbox. So sorry for the poor kid that had to carry that lunchbox to school. He probably got hit over the head with it. And speaking of getting hit over the head with the lunchbox, the last metal lunchbox was made in 1985 because the Florida Board of Education, part of their zero tolerance program, decided that metal lunchboxes were now weapons. So across the United States, they banned metal lunchboxes. So what's ironic about that, the last metal lunchbox to be made was Rambo. Now, in the early 90s, people like Spencer Gifts and Jeebus Candy Company, Hallmark Cards, started issuing these little retro boxes. They had candy in them, they had popcorn in them. But I guess it was alright to carry your candy popcorn to school in metal, but not your lunch. But now the ban is pretty much forgotten. Now it's a matter of cost. You can't really make metal lunchboxes. Also in the early 90s, these shapes came out. A lot of people aren't familiar with these. Now in the early 90s, the U.S. Department of Agriculture issued a new food pyramid. So this is like basic nutrition 101. Place for your sandwich, place for your soup, place for your snack cake, place for your fruit. Now heaven forbid if mom packed a banana or a pear or a grapefruit, you wouldn't have anywhere to put it. But somebody like Laura Ingalls over here from Little House on the Prairie, she would have carried this to school. This is an old lard bucket from the 1840s. Now this actually is not a lunch pail, but this is a tobacco tin from the 1820s. Women couldn't smoke tobacco, nor could they buy it, but they cross-marketed it with these domestic scenes on it, so after the man of the house is done with his tobacco, he'd give this to his wife or his girlfriend as a token of esteem, and she carried these little socials and teas like, "Look ladies, what I got that you can't have." Well, in 1920, the Ohio Art, the same people that made the Etch-a-Sketch, they copied this design and made this in 1920, 1924. They tried to get the guys interested in lunch pails in 1930 with this sport. That looks real masculine, doesn't it? That's the 1930s, and then the plaid designs in the 1950s. There's like 19 different known plaid designs that came out from 1950 to 1973. Even the Girl Scouts had plaids in their best kits. Now, I kind of like the progression Barbie makes throughout the years. Everyone's favorite blonde that has everything. The very first Barbie lunchbox is that black vinyl one in 1962. She's looking very prim and proper with that Bobby Soxer hairdo. But by the late 60s, in that blue one, she's got that Twiggy miniskirt on, that funky hairdo. By the 70s, she's out camping with Ken with a VW microbus in her bell bottoms. By the 80s, she has her own rock band, and she's also a flash dancer. By the late 80s, she's in Hawaii with David Hasselhoff with Baywatch Barbie, and she's also a cheerleader. By the new millennium, she's a photojournalist, and so by now, she's probably like rocket scientist Barbie or divorce court Barbie, and all Ken stuff's in the box, or rehab Barbie with Lindsay Lohan and Britney Spears.